Immediately after Marvel Rivals' reveal, online discourse quickly came to a boil with players drawing seemingly inevitable comparisons to Overwatch. Still, general consensus online pointed to this unexpected blending of genre and IP seeming like a lot of fun. Fans and pundits generally agreed that if Marvel Rivals handles nearly as well as it looks, then developer and publisher NetEase Games might just have a hit on their hands. Well, after dozens of hours spent with Marvel Rivals over its 10-day closed alpha test, I gotta say, I think NetEase Games might just have a hit on their hands. Now, before we dive into the meat and potatoes of this review, I should probably clear a couple of things up. First, this review is in no way influenced by NetEase's much maligned creator contract that more or less kept partners from saying anything negative about Marvel Rivals. My understanding is this contract has since been amended and NetEase has apologized to the community, so they won't address this issue any further other than to say that I'm not a partnered creator and thus was never offered a contract. I do have plenty of positive things to say about Marvel Rivals, as well as a few negatives, but all my thoughts and opinions are my own, just as they should be. Last thing I wanted to address before we get into it, to this point Marvel Rivals has only been made available in a closed alpha state, and while I gotta say I'm honestly impressed by just how well Marvel Rivals runs and plays for it being an alpha, I'm not going to be as critical about the performance and balancing to this point. These are all aspects we can fully discuss once Marvel Rivals officially gets to 1.0, but for now I just wanted to thoroughly answer the question, is Marvel Rivals fun? Alright, so Marvel Rivals pits heroes and villains from various corners of the historic comic book universe against each other in a free-to-play third-person 6v6 hero shooter. Dr. Doom and a 2099 variant of himself clash, resulting in what Rivals refers to as the time stream entanglement, which gives some backstory as to why Loki and Spider-Man might team up to fight Iron Man and Storm, for instance. This overarching plot has yet to offer fans more than a vague setup, but perhaps NetEase has more planned for the narrative when the game fully launches. On that, we'll just have to wait and see. During the closed alpha test, players were given the opportunity to play online in both casual and ranked PvP modes. While Rivals has its own jargon for everything, players essentially chose from a list of 19 characters from either the tank, support, or DPS class to team up with 5 other players and take on opposing teams in either capture the point missions or escorting payloads across the map. Alright, so what did I like about Marvel Rivals? Well, the first positive that is immediately apparent is just how beautiful Marvel Rivals is. And it's not just the character design either, which is distinctly stunning, but it's also the UI. Character selection screens are responsive and fluid, with personality and affection oozing from even the various info tabs. Before loading into a match, the love and care for Rivals is unmistakably felt in everything from the general design of the characters to even the menus. And again, that's before talking about the character design itself, which has a unique flair apart from the MCU or animated series like X-Men 97, decades of comics, or even other Marvel games. Each character is immediately recognizable as their comic book persona, but they also contain a distinct Marvel Rivals look that cohesively binds this game together. But I could talk ad nauseum about the art and the UI. What about the gameplay itself? Well, to get back to that question I posed earlier, is Marvel Rivals fun? As a quick response, I can say that the answer for me is an unequivocal yes. Like any good hero shooter, Marvel Rivals manages to take the cast of differing characters and makes each fun to play and rewarding in their own right. About as rewarding as hitting the like button on this video, by the way. Sure, players are going to have their favorites and least favorites, but after spending some quality time with each of the various heroes and villains, I can see that each has their own merit. For example, during the closed alpha, general consensus was that some of the close combat brawlers like Spider-Man and Black Panther weren't quite as useful as others. Still, their mobility and frantic pace of play made them incredibly fun to control. And while the majority of the player base has still yet to figure these characters out, higher levels of play have given us a glimpse at their potential. Teammates may have initially rolled their eyes when a member selected Spider-Man, but skilled players were able to crack the code, win their team some games, and later absolutely dominate in some cases. What's particularly interesting about Marvel Rivals is that it evolves alongside its players. Tricks that worked on day 1 were no longer viable on day 4 or 5, much less day 10. It wasn't uncommon to see Iron Man or Storm tearing up the skies in the first 24 hours, but the rise of competent Hela players quickly helped to keep these flyers in check. What the strategies of future matches will look like in months or even weeks down the line are honestly a complete mystery to me at this point, and I gotta say, that's incredibly exciting. Sure, developer NetEase may have some tweaking to do to make these characters more competitively viable, but in a short period of time, the player base has already illuminated the fact that the meta is a constantly fluctuating concept that will evolve as gamers figure out new tricks and strategies. Balancing is something all games in this genre have to worry about long term, but it isn't difficult to see a path forward for any of the current characters in Marvel Rivals because we're starting from a foundation in which they're all fun to use, in my opinion. I too have my favorites and least favorites, but I have found enjoyment with each and every character thus far, and already have some go-tos in each of the 3 main categories. Aiding in the sheer enjoyment of these characters are the team-up abilities that allow multiple heroes to synergize, which can range from stat boosts to entirely new abilities. I thought these team-ups might feel a bit gimmicky at first glance, but I actually found myself excited to select a hero if I saw a teammate choose a character with potential synergy opportunities. If a teammate selects Group, for example, I'm almost certainly going to go for Rocket, who rides on his back and gives both players additional health. And if Punisher joins in, that player can take advantage of Rocket's infinite ammo ability, which has already proven to be quite the potent combo. I find all of these characters enjoyable to play in their own right, but this added incentive that team-ups offer really helped to make my decision at the character selection screen, and even served as encouragement for me to try out new heroes. Alright, that's a lot of positives, but there's also a few things that I'm not so crazy about Marvel Rivals. Marvel Rivals' big selling points that differentiate it from other popular titles in the genre are its third-person perspective, team-up abilities, and destructible environments. While I feel as though NetEase has struck gold with the team-ups, and the third-person perspective looks great and controls exceptionally well, I'm still not convinced that destructible environments add to the enjoyment of Marvel Rivals. In fact, it's currently one of my biggest gripes about Rivals at the moment. The destruction is honestly only the half of it, as the regeneration of the map features doesn't really have an in-game tell. Environments will disappear, only to reappear moments later and then block my path or obstruct my view. You can have an opponent squarely in your sights, only for a structure to automatically rebuild, impede your view, and then save them out of sheer dumb luck. Knowing your environment is one thing, but Rivals' landscape perhaps changes a bit too quickly for its own good, detracting from players' skill by adding in some seeming randomness. My other complaint lies in the motion of various characters. Now I know I said that I had a lot of fun with each of these characters, and that's true, but there are some various quirks in the movements of certain heroes that feel like they still need to be ironed out. Hulk sleep is another common gripe among the community, and while I don't find this to be quite as bad as some others, it certainly doesn't feel satisfying either. Hulk just doesn't feel like he's carrying around the kind of weight you'd expect. It was never an issue that the character wasn't going in the direction I intended, but getting there just didn't feel quite right. Meanwhile, some other characters just moved a bit more slowly than I would have preferred. For heroes like Iron Man and Storm, this is perhaps a balancing issue due to their ability to be in constant flight, but the lack of speed does detract from some of the enjoyment, especially in comparison to characters like Star-Lord, who effortlessly jet across the map. Movement speed is something I'm sure the team at NetEase is looking at, however, as this likely all ties into balancing for competitive play. And that brings us nicely to the future of Marvel Rivals. Some of the biggest questions concerning the future of Marvel Rivals pertain to how NetEase will incorporate microtransactions and how the development team will support the game moving forward. There are already 20 leaked characters slated to make their debut, and I got a whole video if you want to check that out, but giving players more maps and game modes will also go a long way to ensuring the longevity of Rivals, as will incorporating more quality of life improvements and further balancing the gameplay. I'm sure Marvel Rivals will incorporate the typical season passes and cosmetics, but it's how aggressively these aspects will be monetized that will play a large part in how fans receive this title. NetEase has a long history as a mobile developer, and that's a medium often criticized due to predatory monetization strategies, but I'm going to give this team the benefit of the doubt, waiting until they unveil their plans for microtransactions before actually weighing in. So here's the bottom line. It doesn't feel right to attribute a score to a game that hasn't been released yet, so I'll refrain until we get that 1.0 launch. That said, Marvel Rivals has a solid foundation to build upon. In an alpha state, Marvel Rivals is already impressively optimized. The team still has a decent amount of polishing ahead to reach a level that I think will make fans happy for that 1.0 launch, but the pillars to build off of are obviously in place. The characters are already incredibly fun to play, each in their own right, and at this point I could genuinely see 19 different players coming away with 19 different favorite characters. Some are surely to be more popular than others, but each has their own pros. Yeah, I'm not convinced that destructible environments will ever be more than a silly gimmick, but honestly, I would simply settle it for being less annoying at this point. Other than that though, all other gripes seem pretty minor and feel fixable in future updates. Overall, I find the negatives are far outweighed by the positives. Most issues took some critical digging because, for me, the act of playing Rivals is a sheer joy. Perhaps the best thing I can say about Marvel Rivals is that the next opportunity NetEase gives me to play this game, I'm gonna take it. And that's after spending dozens of hours in the closed alpha test. Now, I don't know if players are still going to be logging in during the year 2099, but I anticipate Marvel Rivals will have a bright future ahead of it, filled with characters from across the comic book universe. But that does it for this review of the Marvel Rivals Alpha, so until next time, see you on the battlefield.